I think Kanye West is a Nazi. So you invite, and then Nick Fuentes is a Nazi. So you invited a couple of Nazis on your show. When you do that, you're supposed to rip their face off.
Starting heavy
and he
today,
looked
people.
genuinely surprised and hurt that Kanye was leaving.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, he said, oh no, my star, the one that's giving me all this attention is leaving. Oh, what if the money leaves with him? Oh my God.
No.
Hey, you bitch.
100%.
Get man up.
No.
Do a real goddamn interview, you loser.
No, it is an insult to bitches to call Tim Pool a bitch. I'm just saying, okay? The other thing that I'll just note is all we hear from right wingers, including Tim Pool, and yes, you piece of garbage, you're a right winger, you're a little grift of I'm actually a centrist who provides cover for anti-Semites. Yeah, we're not buying it. But we can't go a day without hearing from right wingers defaming innocent people as groomers, as pedophiles, as dangerous individuals, whether we're talking about medical professionals, whether we're talking about educators. It's just endless, nonstop defamation of innocent people. But you invited someone who tried to make a case for pedophilia into your studio to have a nice, delightful conversation. Milo Yiannopoulos sitting right there. You didn't bother to ask a single question about his comments related to pedophilia, correct?
Does Kasparian not realize that she's working with a man who made an argument for bestiality? I mean, there is so much deranged confession through projection going on here. Deranged. Please spare us, Mark. It's either that or Trudeau, so I'm not sure what's worse. Anna Kasparian, first of all, Cenk Uygur calls Kanye, who happens to be a black man, a Nazi. By the way, I'm gonna go. I think we got Nazi, pedophilia, and bestiality within 3 minutes. Let's just see if we're still green lighted here. He calls Kanye a Nazi. Then he calls Tim Pool a bitch. Anna Kasparian calls him a piece of garbage. What were the other words that she had for him? And then goes on to lament that Tim defames others. It would be funny. No, it's just funny. It's actually it's entertainment of the lowest order. It is the Jerry Springer of the interwebs now. The Young Turks have become the Jerry Springer of the interwebs. But that I saw that yesterday, and I'm like, Cenk Uygur is thinking that Tim is caring about the money, which is an indication as to the first thought that goes on in Cenk Uygur's mind. If Cenk Uygur thinks that Tim saw that event as losing money, first of all, Cenk's judgment is off. And if Cenk thinks that Tim Pool is only interested in money at this point in his career, that's more of a reflection of Cenk. But this guy once made a compelling argument for bestiality. I'm being tongue-in-cheek there, by the way. He then goes on to use misogynistic, derogatory terms to talk about Tim Pool. And Anna Kasparian comes out and says, that's an insult to bitch. I'm taking crazy pills, people. All right, today's going to be a good one. Speaking of taking crazy pills. Yesterday we had Whitney Webb, author of One Nation Under Blackmail, the Jeffrey Epstein saga, 1,000 pages, 2 volumes, detailing the blackmail corruption of American government from the 20s to 2013. Yesterday evening, we had Dan Hartman, whose 17-year-old son passed away after 30 days after the jibby jab, 4 days after the jab, he was hospitalized. We had audio issues, but I think that interview got his story out to the world. Today we have Ashley Rindsberg, and it's Rindsberg or Rindsberg. I think it's Rindsberg, and I hate getting people's name. I should have asked before. Who wrote "The Gray Lady Winked," what is the most epic? It's not a takedown of the New York Times. It's just an expose of the New York Times, because the New York Times, for everyone who thinks the New York Times is propaganda, I've got a spoiler alert. Flashback to that meme of the guy with the gun holding it to the other guy's head on the moon. It always has been propaganda. But before we get into that, I don't like doing my pitches with a guest present. You may have noticed it says this video contains a sponsored link thingy thing. It does. Today is EnviroCleanse, the air filtration system that I use in my own home. Yesterday, my wife cooked the fish salmon skin to feed to the dogs. The house smelt like fish. And I said, why don't you bring the air filtration system into the kitchen so that we can air this out instead of opening up the door, letting out all the air conditioned air that wastes money, people. EnviroCleanse home air purification system. I've talked about it before. We need air filtration in our house. We've got asthmatic issues. And we had a filter back in Canada, and it wasn't an EK. It wasn't the EnviroCleanse filter. Patented technology, not in the HEPA filter. It's got a nice fat HEPA filter thing to filter out bigger particles. It's got a patented mineral filtration system that neutralizes odors, bacteria. It is used by the Department of Defense. So that might be good enough of an indication of quality for a great many of people out there. 300,000 classrooms across the United States use it. And I say I'd like to get it into every classroom in Canada. It's quiet. It's effective. I say their words so that I don't get, I don't make promises I can't keep. It stops COVID, flu, colds from spreading aboard their ships and subs. That's why the US Navy uses it. Go to the website, ekpure.com. Promo code VIVA. It's expensive, people. Air filtration systems are, but it's good. Promo code VIVA gets you 10% off the unit, a free air quality monitor, which will show you that it's working. And there is 0% financing for anybody who might need that. And that's it. And I appreciate a sponsor who has the courage to sponsor the channel of the hinged, fringed minority holding unacceptable views. And with that said, people, will be going live to Rumble at some point during the stream. But let's bring in our guest of the day, author, journalist, and I got so many questions. Ashley, 3, 2, 1, and we're in. Sir, how goes the battle?
I think it goes well, actually.
Last name is Rindsberg or Rindsberg?
Rindsberg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to delve into your childhood just for a bit. But before we get there, to see how you got to where you are and what went into that work, which everybody has to read. If you want to know the arguments as to how to discredit the New York Times in real time to anybody, read the book. 30,000-foot overview. Who are you?
I am an author and investigative journalist, and a guy who's been in and around media for quite a long time. Basically, my whole career in various forms, and I'm really somebody who I'm a bit of an explorer as well. I left the United States after college. I worked in San Francisco for a year at an incredible organization called Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine guys, and then got a job on a sailboat as a deckhand in Greece and Italy, and just kind of kept on going east. Was in Israel for many, many years. So I'm like one of these people that has to just look around the next corner, even when it's not really the wisest move.
We're gonna get there, because I think it was the intro of the book which illustrated some of the problems that you had, at least with this particular book. If I may, and tell me if you don't want to talk about too much of childhood, family stuff. Where are you born? Where are you from? Siblings? What your parents do?
I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa. I grew up in Philadelphia, Las Vegas, San Diego. I went to college in upstate New York, Cornell University. And like I said, worked in San Francisco for whatever it was, a year and a half, 2 years. My parents are South Africans who are now Americans, proudly. And my dad's a doctor, my mom's a teacher. I've got a brother who is a marketing executive. And I live here right now. We're nomadic, but at the moment I'm in London with my family, my wife and kids. And I think that's it. Yeah, unless you want to go into the cousins or
No. But so born in South Africa, why did your parents move to America?
I think the writing was on the wall. South Africa in the 1980s was not, it was still an okay place to be of a certain class, that class being white, but it was not a just system by any stretch of that word, and it was getting worse and not better. I think that was really clear for them. My dad, I think, was not particularly eager to serve in the army, the regime's military. So he wanted to be a doctor. He wanted to help people, and that's what he did. And I think a lot of it is also just kind of this very universal notion of making a better life in America. It sounds very 20th, 19th century, but that was the 20th century, so it's appropriate. But we were kind of like that, off the boat, looking for a better life.
How old were you when you came over?
I was 2.
Okay, so no memories.
Yeah.
Your only conscious memories are of America.
Yes, yeah, that would be the case. Yeah.
What was I going to say? I was actually kind of surprised. In Florida, there's a very big South African community, and many of them are recent. Is the word immigrants? Because in as much as things were bad 20 years ago, from what I was, had a good discussion, they've gotten worse, and there's another wave of people leaving.
Yeah, that's true.
So what did you study? How did you get into journalism?
I studied, interestingly enough, I studied philosophy. I sort of did a double major in philosophy and something that's called science and technology studies, which is the history, sociology, and philosophy of science. And at the time, I was like, when am I ever going to use this completely worthless degree? Turns out, actually, today, that is all we are all talking about, at least most of our conversation. When it's not about media, we're talking about science. And what science is and what it's all about. And that I found was very, very interesting. I mean, we have today this idea in the media that the science, right? The science is determinative of everything, and it's completely objective and neutral, dispassionate. And the number one principle, the premise of the entire field of the sociology of science is that basically scientists are human too, which means they are corruptible. They suffer from envy, greed, passion, love, despair, hope, the full range of human emotions that leads people to do things that are not always ethical, and sometimes things that are ethical but not always don't always lead to the most accurate results. And sometimes they do. It's a mixed bag. So that has turned out very important to my current reporting on COVID corruption, and COVID, the origin of the pandemic in particular. I came out of college basically with those degrees. I ended up working at the Internet Archive. Like I said, these are the guys that do the Wayback Machine, meaning they've saved the entire internet, web page by web page. It was a guy named Brewster Kahle, an internet pioneer, visionary, who created some very, very early internet technology called WAIS, Wide Area Internet Search. It's kind of like World Wide Web predecessor, prototype. And I went to work for them, and it was really cool. We did this thing called a bookmobile, internet bookmobile. You could print and create a book anywhere in the world, including in the middle of a desert, didn't matter, and give it to a kid. That was the idea. I'm like, get people educated, get books in people's hands. I took that to Egypt, where I delivered it to the Library of Alexandria. This big project, came back, and I'm like, I got to keep moving. That's where I got to Israel. It was like at the tail end of the Intifada, the second Intifada. There was a lot going on. A lot in the media that I saw did not really correspond to what was the truth on the ground, the reality on the ground. And I just started towing to journalism. Almost, it wasn't like an intentional, like I want to be a journalist type thing. It was like coming across stories. A big story that I broke initially was about an Obama intelligence appointee. He was, I think, very, very high ranking. It was sort of like the head of of one of the national intelligence apparatuses. And it turned out this guy had very long-standing deep ties to the Obama family, the Osama bin Laden family, and was on record praising them right after 9/11. Comes out, first thing the guy says after 9/11 is the bin Ladens are wonderful people. And then I uncovered more and more about this character, including his ties to Chinese state-owned oil companies. So this guy was on the board of a Chinese state-owned oil company, was going to head up essentially the agency that compiles intelligence for the United States of America to hand to the president. That was going to be his job. And everyone found that okay. And I was shocked that I was the guy who found this sitting in my little room in Tel Aviv.
So this is the second Intifada is give or take 2002, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like it was 2000, started in 2000, probably tail end of it was about 2002, 2003. And
are you dual citizenship? Any citizenship? You're there just on a visa?
At the time, I entered as a tourist and was kind of going back and forth. I had a very life-shaking incident at that time. I just had come to Israel after sailing on that boat for 2-3 months, working as a deckhand, and my best friend from childhood, who I attended college with, and it was sort of my creative partner, disappeared in Nicaragua, and on an island that is also a volcano. And there was this massive search launched that included private military contractors, the Nicaraguan army, police, etc. They looked for him for 3 weeks, and that was another point where I was reading the media about this because it made international headlines, and I'm like, they're just writing things that are just flat out not true, like factually just wrong, you know. And there's no, it's a weird thing because you don't feel like, of course, there's not any like ill intent there. There's just blatant error, and when you're on the other side of it, you're like, I know that it's wrong, and I know that there's no way to correct it, and I'm just gonna live with the fact that they got all these things wrong about my missing friend, who, you know, that would be the last thing written about him ever because he died there. So again, another point with the media, you just find this like clash between media and reality in these scenarios that you're witnessing.
I didn't ask how old you are. I think we're both the same age, right?
I'm 41. I think.
Okay, so you're a little younger than me, but so you're in Israel for the second Intifada. And so my question is, when you say like what's going on the ground is not what's being reported, in which sense do you mean it? Because some people will say that Western media is excessively forgiving to Israel. Others, I mean, one screen, two films. Others are going to say they're unduly critical of US. Depends on what media you're watching. So in what way did you experience that what was going on the ground was not what was being reported?
Generally speaking, I think, you know, from the 20 years that I was in Israel, and probably will be back there. I'm now a citizen of Israel. You know, I think the biggest thing, broadest thing, is that, and this is not about like who's right in the conflict, you know, because that's debatable. The thing that I always find so strange is when you think you get the sense in the media that it's like just all out warfare between Jews and Arabs in Israel, and then you're in Israel and you live life there. And Jews and Arabs live together and work together. And when I take my kid to a doctor, that is often an Arab doctor. And if I need to hire someone to do something for my whatever, that is often an Arab. And there's just this constant coexistence that has nothing to do with this like total all-out combat that you get from the media, where the hatred is everywhere. It's not. In fact, and you talk to people, it's not that we're just begrudgingly accepting one another's presence. You talk to them and there's a common sense, like we're both here, we both understand what this is, and there's humor and there's, you know, kindness. That's the broadest sense. I think, you know, on the other side of it, with a more specific Intifada part, was you never really got a sense in the Western media how devastating it was, how it was blanket. It was every day. You're living in a war zone in Israel. You know, the narrative emerged that, oh, Israelis are just kind of hanging out and drinking coffee and the Palestinians are getting bombed. And that is, I saw that narrative emerge again and again over the 6 or 7 wars that I was present for living in Israel. And you know, that's not to take away from what Palestinians suffer during those episodes, which is often severe, but it's also not, you know, why downplay the one side? That's what I'm curious about. Why this notion that Israelis are just chilling, just hanging out through a war, when the reality is that they're running in 3 a.m. with their children into bomb shelters like it's 1940, and I've been in that situation myself. Picking a kid out of bed at 2 a.m, running because you've got 15 seconds from the siren, which is an air raid siren, by the way, into your bomb shelter that's in your, wherever it is, in your basement or your building, whatever, and huddling there over and over and over. And the psychological impact, the psychological toll that takes, and of course the physical toll that's people endure when they are maimed or killed. You know, that is not something that I saw in the media, or still see a lot. You know, the one thing we saw in one of the more recent conflicts was with these 9 or 10 children, Palestinian children, and maybe there was one or two that were Israeli. Front page New York Times, their photos, right? And you think, wow, that's, I mean, these are dead children who were killed. And a few of them turned out to have been actually members of terror organizations, and they were not as young as they were made to be seen as by the Times. But the bigger picture there is saying, hold on, okay, I get why you do that, but where are the dead children from the war in Yemen? Where are the dead children on the front page in the war in Syria? Where are the dead children from the Holocaust that the New York Times never covered? Why that one conflict in this particular way? That's what stands out for me.
It's interesting. And I can hear the arguments from people on the other side. Well, people who are going to say the rebuttal to that is you're dealing with an inequality of power. And so as far as coverage goes, you might have to have some inequality of coverage or depiction in order to counterbalance that inequality of power. Israel developed, Iron Dome, this and that. Palestinians either victims of Israeli aggression or victims of their own government corruption, but victims to explain or people are just going to say it's not that bad, or that's what you get if you're occupying territory. How does one respond to that if from a journalistic perspective?
Well, I think then that's okay. I mean, if that's your position, that's a legitimate position to take. But at that moment, you are no longer dispassionately reporting news. You are championing one side in a war. That's what you're doing. And you might be doing the same thing in a war, in the current war, the Ukraine and the Russian war against the Ukraine. And you might think that the Ukrainians are justified, and you might champion the Ukrainians, and now you are a champion for that side. But other people might not think that that's the case. Other people might make the case that Ukraine, along with Western powers, have been goading Russia into this situation for the last 10 to 15 years. And it's not as one-sided as it's portrayed. And I think this is the real problem, is that this kind of coverage leads us into these black and white, good versus evil narratives. They lead us into narratives, period. That's where it really becomes problematic. When you start becoming a champion as a news organization and not as an activist organization or a human rights organization, but as a news organization, you're fundamentally changing your own mission. Your mission was once, let's just put the facts on the table and let our readers decide. Now the mission is, let's convince them of something particular. And that's where I find this to be problematic.
All right, I'm going to ask this question, and then we're going to go on. You and I don't go anywhere, but then I'm going to close down the stream on YouTube, and everyone should go over to Rumble. This is the question. From what you're describing, it sounds like your journey to this book, which is ultimately a realization that the New York Times has always been activist, partisan journalism, and not gray lady as she was supposed to be. Sounds like it was 20 years in the making. When did you first realize this? And when did you get the idea to write the book? But before you answer that, I'm going to remove this from YouTube. Head over to Rumble, everybody. You got the link. It will not change the tenor of the discussion. This will be on YouTube tomorrow, but we're going to go and favor the platform that actually favors free speech. So